Welcome to Pasadena Monthly. I'm your host, Justin Chapman. Happy Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander Heritage Month and National Historic Preservation Month. After taking a look at what's been going on in Pasadena this past month, we'll speak with our guest, Sue Mossman, Executive Director of Pasadena Heritage, who is retiring after 45 years with the organization. But before we get started, let's check out these Pasadena media news briefs.
Shepherd's Door, a domestic violence resource center, is offering 40-hour online domestic violence certificate counseling training. Those who are community advocates, medical personnel, social workers, law enforcement, therapists, volunteers, case managers, student counselors, and clergy are encouraged to attend. To learn more about the training and how to register, visit shepherddoor.org. Lester Graves Lennon, Rosebud Magazine poetry editor and two-time Pushcart Prize nominee, has been named the Altadena Poet Laureate Editor-in-Chief for the 2024 to 2026 term. And Seba Sarwar, writer, poet, artist, teacher, and social activist, has been named the Altadena Poet Laureate for community events for the 2024 to 2026 term. The Altadena Poets Laureate play an important role in promoting poetry in Altadena through the organization of public poetry readings and workshops at the Altadena libraries, publication of the online Altadena Literary Review, and publication of the printed Altadena Literary Review anthology. To learn more about the Altadena Poets Laureate program, visit altadenapoetryreview.com. Pasadena Media is proud to announce it's been honored with 3 2024 WAVE Awards in the following categories: Government Access Professional, Talk Show Professional, and Experimental All Producers. One of the award-winning submissions was created by one of our community producers through the use of Pasadena Media's facilities. The WAVE Awards honors excellence in community programming from the Alliance for Community Media's West Region. The winners were announced in a special online ceremony on Friday, April 19th.
And the WAVE Award goes to Pasadena Public Health Department, Pasadena Media.
On October 6, 1892, the City of Pasadena Board of Directors established the Pasadena Board of Health.
And the WAVE Award goes to Pasadena Monthly, Nikki High, Pasadena Media.
Let's patch in our guest, Nikki High. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
And the WAVE Award goes to Your New Odyssey, Episode 6, Veronica Vargas and Shabu Productions.
Woohoo! I love diving into the fantastic with my imagination, where the heart can speak louder.
Pasadena Media is honored to be recognized this year, and we send our congratulations to all of this year's winners and finalists.
Let's turn next to our lightning round of news updates. 1. President Biden expanded the San Gabriel Mountains National Monument by nearly 106,000 acres, including parts of the Arroyo Seco, adding to the existing nearly 347,000 acres via a presidential proclamation. The monument was originally designated by President Obama in 2014. The expansion effort has been 10 years in the making, and Pasadena Congress members Judy Chu and Adam Schiff helped get it over the finish line. The expansion includes $2.5 million from the Rivers and Mountains Conservancy, $2 million from the California Conservation Corps to hire 6 new forest rangers, $2.3 million from the federal Great American Outdoors Act to rehabilitate barracks and provide housing for Angeles National Forest staff, and $1 million from LA County for the nonprofit Nature for All to hire 6 staff. 2. The Pasadena Unified School District Board of Education appointed Dr. Elizabeth Blanco as its new superintendent. Also, the Pasadena City College Board of Trustees appointed Jose Gomez as its new superintendent/president. Both were serving as the interim superintendents since last summer. Gomez accepted the position in principle pending the negotiation and finalization of the terms of his agreement, and the board will vote on the final agreement next month. This year, PCC is celebrating its centennial. 3, the city is currently undergoing its annual operating budget hearings process. Council committees have been meeting to consider the proposed budgets for each department. The city manager's recommended budget for fiscal year 2025 is $1.1 billion. Last year, it was about $1.2 billion. Pasadena's revenue growth has slowed somewhat this year due to inflation and decreasing property and sales tax revenue. The city manager said the city has thrived in many areas and is fortunate not to be in the cost reduction mode facing so many other local governments. But we will need to continue being resourceful and creative and continuing to invest in current services, operations, and infrastructure while adapting to the future needs of the community, end quote. Fiscal year 2025 recommended operating budget furthers the city's mission to deliver exemplary municipal services responsive to our entire community, consistent with our history, culture, and unique character. Council is expected to adopt the budget at its June 10th meeting. Read the budget at cityofpasadena.net/finance. The council also approved the 2025 to 29 capital improvement program budget, which is a financial plan listing facilities and infrastructure improvement project needs consisting of 213 active projects at about $2 billion, of which only about $758 million has been appropriated. 4, the City Council voted to raise sewer and refuse rates for the first time in several years. The average residential monthly sewer use fee will increase from $4.55 to $11.05. And for refuse fees, residents will see an average increase of about $6 to $8. The rates vary depending on the service, and subsequent increases will be implemented over the next few years. The council will also consider adjusting water rates at its June 3rd meeting. Staff have said the increased rates are necessary to maintain the city's infrastructure and the quality of services for residents. The new rates go into effect on July 1st. 5, the City Council approved a $1 million reimbursement agreement with the One Arroyo Foundation to implement the Arroyo Seco Trail project. The project involves various trail improvements along the upper and lower Arroyo trail loops, and the purpose of the project is to provide safer, more accessible, and more contiguous routes throughout the Arroyo Seco by rehabilitating existing trails through stabilization of deteriorated trail segments and improvements to trail features. One Arroyo has also received a $200,000 grant from the Shire Foundation to support One Arroyo's efforts to revitalize the Arroyo by connecting its 3 distinct areas, improving trail conditions, and reopening the historic Parker Mayberry Bridge. 6, Mayor Gordo is forming a task force made up of council members that will focus on addressing the city's historical injustices, such as whites-only covenants in real estate, which were spearheaded by former Pasadena Mayor Al Stewart and Herbert Hahn of the Hahn & Hahn law firm in the 1930s and 40s. The task force could also look at the 710 freeway displacement and the Chinese laundry that was burned down by a racist mob in 1885, among other issues. 7, Pasadena's independent police auditor, Dr. Richard Rosenthal, recommended in an informational item that the City Council place a charter amendment on the ballot to change to an independent police monitor model, which would have more powers in police officer personnel issues during investigations rather than after investigations, and thus enhance oversight. Mayor Gordo argued that bringing the IPA closer to the police department in that way would increase the perception of less independence, and the majority of the council were apparently not in favor of placing this amendment on the ballot. Since the city would need to meet and confer with labor unions before placing this on the ballot due to collective bargaining requirements, some argued that there isn't enough time to place this on the November ballot, but the discussion will continue at the Public Safety Committee. 8, the City Council this week continued its public hearing to June 3rd regarding whether to rename Dayton Street between Fair Oaks and Raymond Avenues as Troop Way, after a local R&B musical group that was formed in Pasadena in 1984. The renaming is opposed by the neighboring Castle Green HOA, among others, due to Dayton Street's historical significance. The HOA wrote in a letter to council that Dayton Street is part of the historic Old Pasadena landmark area that includes Castle Green and Hotel Green, and was once home to Pasadena's first firehouse, first library, and other historically significant venues over the years. The HOA suggested that the city consider alternative ways to honor Troop, such as installing a plaque referencing the part of Pasadena where the group members were born, lived, or created their work. 9, the Charter Study Task Force unanimously voted to recommend to the council that no changes be made to the timing of the mayoral election. As it stands, council members from districts 1, 2, 4, and 6 would have to give up their council seat in order to run for mayor, while council members from districts 3, 5, and 7 would not. The task force considered a 6-year mayoral term and removing the mayoral election to its own cycle, but ultimately decided not to pursue either option. The task force is also looking at campaign contribution limits and council member compensation, among other issues. Its last meeting was yesterday. The task force's final report, a draft of which can be read on the city's website, will be presented at the council's June 10th meeting. And 10, Pasadena Congressmember Judy Chu has secured more than $1.8 million in direct federal funding to support two projects in Pasadena. A job creation facility that will provide training for professional technical healthcare and skilled trades, professions, and vocations, and a groundwater treatment facility which will service about a quarter of the city's water demand. Let's welcome our guest, Sue Mossman, now former or soon-to-be former Executive Director of Pasadena Heritage. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Sue moved to Pasadena in 1976 and worked for Pasadena Heritage for 45 years and served as Executive Director for 30 years. Under her tenure, Pasadena Heritage saved countless Pasadena landmarks from demolition and grew to become one of the most successful and respected preservation organizations in the country. She helped save Bullock's Pasadena, now Macy's, and the Stewart Pharmaceutical Company building, now Innoys Within and Housing, create Heritage Housing Partners and the biennial Colorado Street Bridge Party, and defeat the 710, among other victories. So, Sue, how does it feel after all these years to be retiring? How did the recent dinner in your honor go?
Well, the dinner was absolutely fabulous. It was a beautiful party in a wonderful historic place, the Athenaeum at Caltech. Mm-hmm. And I felt so honored and celebrated, but it truly is a bittersweet moment, and I haven't actually thought very much about next chapters. I'm just trying to get through this next transition time. Mm-hmm. And one thing's for sure, I'll keep caring about Pasadena and working to save historic places. It's in my DNA, and I'll just keep working on it, but in a different capacity.
Mm-hmm. And now, are you serving until the next person is chosen, or have you already moved on?
Well, we're just a few days here ahead of our official announcement. Mm-hmm. A new executive director has been selected. Mm-hmm. She will start on June 3rd, but our official announcement isn't quite ready yet, so I'm not authorized to reveal that, but mm-hmm. We're very excited. It's a wonderful person with great skills, and we're just looking forward to new leadership. Mm-hmm. And I'm looking forward to working with her to make sure the transition goes smoothly.
That's great. And when you're going through that recruitment process, what skill set were you and the organization looking for that role? Like, what kind of person should that be?
Well, we started by setting goals of what kinds of skill sets would really be the best to take Pasadena Heritage into the future. Mm-hmm. I think after 45 years, the city has changed, the world of preservation has changed, and the organization has grown and matured. So new leadership really should be a person who can think about community-wide priorities, can think about telling stories as well as saving bricks and mortar buildings, which is where we started. And also someone who can really engage with a younger audience. We're very eager to broaden the diversity of our programs and our membership, and also to attract younger people to the cause of preservation. So all of those things were on the wish list for a new director, as well as some strong fundraising ability, and of course, a love of historic preservation as a meaningful value for the community.
Mm-hmm. And tell us about why you decided to get involved with Pasadena Heritage in the first place, and what Pasadena was like in those days. Was it facing the same kind of challenges, or was it a different dynamic?
Well, it was almost by accident. My then husband and I had just moved to Pasadena. We bought an old bungalow in South Central Pasadena that needed a ton of work. Tom, my ex-husband, was very familiar with architecture and the Craftsman era. I knew nothing. I was an English major in college. I had had a variety of jobs before coming to Pasadena, but really didn't know much about architecture or neighborhood history. But once we bought our house, and I had a 1-year-old and I was home, I began to learn about the community. I was working on the house every day, and I just got inspired to further embrace my neighborhood. Very worried about traffic, about the 710 freeway. Mm-hmm. The 210 freeway had not long been completed, and it really changed the city.
Right.
The Plaza Pasadena was just opened, and it was a new downtown shopping mall right in the middle of Pasadena that had actually obliterated some important history. So the more I learned, the more I got concerned and involved and excited about trying to help the community hang on to its historic magic while seeing all this change coming. And at that moment, Old Pasadena was slated for demolition, the whole downtown district. The Colorado Street Bridge was crumbling. The Civic Center was threatened with high-rise buildings. It was going to be a totally different Pasadena and not the city we had chosen to move to and invest our limited resources in buying a house and becoming part of. So the times were different, felt in many ways more urgent and threatening. But there was also a real community movement to rise up and speak for the city we loved. So I got involved with a fledgling Pasadena Heritage, was a year old, learned to be a docent, started volunteering in the office where I could take my 1-year-old to address newsletters or answer the phone, and then was offered a job when that little boy went to nursery school.
What are some of some of Pasadena Heritage's victories over the years?
Well, you mentioned kindly a few in your introduction. I would say saving Old Pasadena was huge. And without Pasadena Heritage under Claire Bogart's direction, I was working under Claire for about 14 years when I started. Really, Old Pasadena would not be here. The Colorado Street Bridge was threatened, and making sure it stayed standing and got the investment it needed to repair it and then seismically upgrade it. The Vista del Arroyo bungalows, which is where the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals is today, a beautiful campus. That was very derelict property. We didn't know what its fate would be. And the 710 freeway was a looming black cloud over all of Southwest Pasadena and could have turned Pasadena into the largest interchange of multiple freeways and really, I think, obliterated the hometown feeling of the city. But it was a tough battle. There were people who believed that was the answer to all our problems, rather than the devastation that we could foresee. So those were some of the big issues. A couple of my favorite projects to work on, which you also mentioned, saving the Stewart Pharmaceutical building in East Pasadena. No one actually understood what an important work of architecture that was. Even I didn't understand. That was my introduction to Edward Durrell Stone, the world-famous architect who designed it. And it was when Johnson & Johnson bought that building and planned to demolish it that we all got mobilized to save it. And they were tough opponents, but we were victorious in the end. And the best parts of that building remain and are being put to good use today. Another favorite story for me is Macy's Bullocks on South Lake. When I first moved here, and I had an aunt and uncle on the west side, and my aunt used to come to Pasadena to shop in that Bullocks and the little shops across the street from it. And she took me to tea in the tea room at Bullocks, Pasadena. And I loved that building. And when it was threatened with new development, it was very personal to me to go to bat for it. And ultimately, it took a lawsuit to stop that project. But we prevailed, and the building and the store were saved. Although it's a place I worry about today, the future of department stores in this retail world is questionable. And that's such an extraordinary building that I just want to be sure it has a future. And the last couple I will mention, the YWCA former YWCA has been on our agenda for 30 years, and it is still an endangered building. I'm hoping that a new hotel project is coming forth soon that will incorporate that building and actually restore it. I would love to see that happen, and we'll work hard to make sure. And I'm very happy to be on the task force technical oversight committee, I think it's the technical term, for the Central Library, another place that I dearly love. You know, took my kids to the children's reading room there every week growing up, and have probably checked 2,000 books out of that library. I think that's really on the right track. It's going to be a very meaningful project, but we have a ways to go to get there.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, some of these landmarks you've mentioned, we almost take them for granted and just assume they'll always be there. But in fact, they've been threatened along the way and could easily go away if people aren't vigilant and fight for them. What are some examples of when historic preservation didn't win out and we lost a building or a landmark or a sense of place?
Well, the biggest one that comes to mind is the Huntington Hotel. And in the early years of Pasadena Heritage, it was the old Huntington. And a group of developers purchased the property and wanted to build a new hotel there. And we believed that the old building could be rehabbed. And there were many battles that ultimately ended up as a ballot measure as to whether the old building could be saved. And we lost that vote. I think it was 48 to 52% or whatever. And that was a heartbreaking night. And they did tear down the original hotel. They rebuilt a new hotel, saving some historic outbuildings and bungalows. And that's now, of course, the Langham today, a beautiful hotel, a very successful destination. And we've actually developed a very warm working relationship with the Langham folks. But 30 years ago, that was a tough battle, and we lost. Right. I mentioned the Vista del Arroyo Hotel that became the Ninth Circuit Court, falling into terrible disrepair, owned by the federal government. It wasn't until Judge Chambers stepped up and said, I think that could be a courthouse, that the government decided to invest heavily in refurbishing that building. But there were 24 bungalows surrounding the hotel that were part of the hotel complex. And we wanted them all to be saved. And GSA, the federal agency, didn't want them to be saved, and the judges didn't want them. In the end, we were able to save 12 of them, but we lost all the rest. So watching those go down one by one by one was hard.
Do you think Pasadena has struck the right balance in terms of historic preservation and growth and development on the other hand?
That's a very eloquent way to put that question. Much more so. But to me, it's never heavily enough in favor of preservation. I would keep everything. That's not realistic. So the challenge becomes, how do you strike that balance? And I think every new project that comes along, that's the question. You know, can you protect the old and build the new? Can you mesh the two? Do you have to sacrifice something because other community needs are greater? We're talking with Pasadena City College right now about some buildings they would like to demolish, including the original library building. And we think that should be saved and reused, but it's not a large enough building for the needs they foresee. So can there be a solution there? I'm not sure. Another recent example is the new Porsche dealership that Rusnak is proposing in East Pasadena. You know, a Porsche dealership is a wonderful thing for a city, and this is the right market for them. They have an excellent reputation, but there's an old Daylight Factory building on that property that we think is the best example we have. in Pasadena. And originally they thought they couldn't save it. But by working and working and working together, they found a solution to put a new dealership on the site, save the old building, which will kind of be the vintage Porsche Club headquarters on the site. So I hope that's going to have a happy ending.
And tell us about the newly established Sue Mossman Historic Preservation Fund and how people can get involved and help support Pasadena heritage.
Well, the new fund, which it's my great honor to have it named for me, will be an endowment for Pasadena heritage, which means donations to the fund are protected, are kept in place. But as the fund grows, it can generate revenue that can be used every year to further the mission of the organization and support the hardworking staff and keep us all going. So there is information on our website about donations to the fund, and we would welcome anyone who'd like to contribute to the long term to consider that option. And I would also say the future of Pasadena heritage will really be about attracting, exciting, and educating our younger generations of residents and people who visit here and work here, because we need to pass this torch on to a younger group of people who will care and who will carry it forward. And that's a challenge for us. So anyone interested in history, who likes history, who is a teacher, who is a bicycle rider or a walker, or has another agenda related to community values and sees a link to the past, please come and talk to us and share your thoughts and help us build the new generation of preservationists. We need them.
Absolutely. Well, Sue, thank you so much for coming on and talking about this. Pasadena, such a special place, and that's due in no small part to your efforts. So thank you for what you've done, and thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Before we go, here is this month in Pasadena history. For the first time in at least modern history, the city of Pasadena will be holding a Memorial Day commemoration at which the names of more than 300 men and women who gave their lives in service to the United States in World War I and II, Korea, Vietnam, Afghanistan, and Iraq, and other conflicts will be read in a solemn ceremony in Memorial Park. The event will begin at 10:30 a.m. this Monday, May 27th, at 85 East Holly Street. The Condor Squadron will perform a missing man formation flyover, paying tribute to those who did not return from battle. A final homage to the fallen. The event will conclude with funeral honors performed by the 2nd Battalion, 23rd Marines. Then at 3 p.m. the same day, former mayors Bill Bogart and Terry Tornick will officiate the annual Enduring Heroes Memorial Day tribute in Defenders Park at 450 West Colorado Boulevard. The events are open to the public. Thank you all so much for joining me for this episode of Pasadena Monthly. Tune in every 4th Friday of the month at 5 p.m. Learn more at pasadenamedia.org and justindouglaschapman.com. Drop me a line at jchapman@cityofpasadena.net. We'll see you next time.